Hi, welcome. John here. Remember, I promised you a little bit of bonus content. This is really for the Beast Vision Sprint cohort, but it's actually applicable to really leaders of any hyper growth organization. And what we're really talking about here is OH3, the office of H3. But what it's about is how do you balance long-term vision versus near-term priorities, execution versus strategy, right? And you remember me talking about the three horizon framework and how we've adjusted that for hypergrowth. And it's a really powerful framework. So Horizon One is really kind of the name for all the things we're doing in our current wave of execution. So that's really the idea of all the activities and where we're making investments and the bets we're placing between now and what's the big milestone. So maybe it's launching a product, or completing a funding raise, or something like that, and actually putting a clear end to Horizon One. Sometimes it's time, but it's best if it's a clear milestone. And so now we know that anything that we're working on that fits in Horizon One, okay, we can argue why it fits, but that's this big priority. And if it doesn't fit in Horizon One, where's it go? Well, maybe Horizon Two. So Horizon Two is going to be that next wave of execution. And again, maybe that's like a calendar year or 2 quarters or whatever, but it's much more powerful if it's the next really big inflection point. So this is a really great filter for the urgency of things that we need to work on, and a really great way to help people shed noise and get aligned on what's important. But what about Horizon 3? And we've been spending all our time this whole week together talking about Horizon 3, which is the promised land, when we've really achieved success. That doesn't come right after Horizon 2. That's way out in the future. But it's really important that we've got this really tangible, high fidelity way of explaining what success looks like somewhere out in the future. 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that's up to you. But it's some clear point in time where we can describe that we've really achieved everything we're trying to do. And doing that at a high enough level of fidelity that people can really feel tangible about that and really understand the things we're going to have to accomplish to get there. And it's purely aspirational. But so what we're doing right now is we're executing on our near-term priorities. And frankly, a lot of those are batted around by investors and customers, the need to raise money and so on. And yet somehow that needs to take us on a path and be aligned with what we see coming in the future. And that really requires that we can see all of the potential and possible ways the future is unfolding and have a really clear view of our preferred future and what we're trying to accomplish. All of this sounds highly theoretical, but it's actually not. We have to have that clarity, because as we go along and we learn, we get batted around and our direction changes all over the place. And actually formally adjusting our Horizon 3 thinking is really, really critical, especially if we end up getting forced to pivot in any meaningful way, because we're going to learn things along the way. The technology and competitive landscape is going to change along the way. And we need ways to not have to worry about that while we're in the full flow of execution, but worry about that so that we learn from it and adjust as we move forward. And what we do in our kind of Horizon 3 thinking is introduce the idea of the 4 C's. And that's really stopping at these different points. And I like to do it at the shift between Horizon 1 and Horizon 2. Stop the whole team and spend a bit of time, 2-3 days. I like a week, 1 week between these two horizons, to talk about, okay, what did we learn about the critical forces? We built our force map, we know our thesis. What shifted? What forces do we need to adjust our thinking around? What's going on with the competitive behavior? What are we learning around how our competitors are responding to things? How are customers behaving? And what are we learning about the capital markets? Where are investors placing bets? Who's getting a premium? What is it about their strategy that's getting them the premium? Whose strategy is underwater and why? And what do we need to think about in our view of what success looks like and how we get there, that we bring into Horizon 2? And this is actually the center of becoming an agile organization. And frankly, it causes a lot of tension because I'm working on urgent things right now, and that's in tension with our sort of Horizon 3 strategy and vision. And we actually want that tension. We actually want to be able to have those discussions, but we don't want the tension to cripple the organization. And so, it's critical that everybody's really clear on where we're going and why we're going there, but that we can have these conversations to shed noise and stay aligned. That's the job of Office of H3. And in my view, we have all kinds of activity streams inside an organization, right? We're doing marketing, biz dev, product development, and so on. And in a well-run organization, we have really distinct owners, distinct objectives, distinct KPIs. Why wouldn't we also include the stream of activity related to what's going on in the world that's going to impact our success? So we call it Office of H3, and we give it its own stream, and we give it absolute accountability and a clear owner. Typically, the clear owner is the CEO. Sometimes the CEO will appoint a strategy person, but no matter what, there's a clear stream and a clear owner. And we think of this as a kind of ongoing stream of activity. And the job is to stay ahead of the change curve so that we don't get blindsided. That's the job. And that's super important for everybody who's got their head down focusing on Horizon 1 and Horizon 2 to know deep in their core that somebody is accountable for looking at these disruptive forces. And this is where we bring in the learning loops, and that's how everybody gets a voice. And it's also how we actually build confidence that we're all aligned. We're thinking about this stuff. We're just not distracted on a day-to-day basis. And when you formalize it and people know that it's happening and know that there's going to be learning loops, it actually builds trust, not just on the team, but also with your investors and frankly, even customers and partners, because you can actually share a lot of the thinking and the learnings along the way. So these regular learning cycles and having bringing those to the table is powerful internally and externally. And God forbid you ever need to do a full pivot. You're going to be damn happy you did this, because this kind of a discipline hardwires agility right into the organization. Because if you do it right, you're aligned all the way along. And if there's a major shift in the market that's changing the fundamental thinking, you can hone right in on that, and you already have a habit of having these conversations, and you can make those pivots and stay aligned much more quickly. But it doesn't work if there's no ownership and accountability and sort of the appropriate level of resourcing. And usually at early-ish stage, high growth stages, that's about a half a day a month. Certainly the companies I work directly with on Office of H3, it's usually the CEO or a couple people from the leadership team, and it's about a half day's effort every month. And it's easy to think of this as some theoretical thing, but it's not. There are two really critical reasons to invest this time and the money. One is just to avoid getting blindsided. Things are moving fast, and these emerging risks, you have to be early on the curve or you can get blindsided. But you also can find the opportunities, and if you're not early, you often miss the chance to capitalize on those opportunities. So it's not theoretical, and there are clear, tangible values, but it needs to be made rigorous, actionable, and measurable. So it needs a clear mandate, right? And so in practice, really succeeding as an organization depends on the decisions we make and how we execute. And maybe that's outside of control of the Office of H3, but Office of H3 can control 4 very specific things: awareness and analysis, signal to noise, triggering action, and profile and influence. So what we mean is, organizationally, we have to be aware of and be doing activities that ensure we're not missing something important. And there's a lot going on in the world, so we have to do things that help prioritize what things need to rise to the top and what things can go to the background. And everybody needs to know this is happening and be pulled in at the right times. And there needs to be trigger and action. There needs to be formal activities that build alignment when something rises to the top and we need to make a decision and influence execution. And then it's really going to go to the ownership of the execution stream and our partners. And how do we share these learnings and help them adjust and help everyone stay aligned? And these are things that Office of H3 can actually have direct ownership of. So with awareness and analysis, there's things around forces and the force map, and how we actually use those and bring those into the organization and bring learning loops into the organization. And when it comes to signal to noise, it's ensuring that the most important topics are rising to the top and that we're making decisions of these. And there's specific KPIs that I've listed, and you can read if you want, but there's specific ways to make that actionable and measurable. And when it comes to triggering action, there are numerous different approaches, but one is a simple do more, do less, stop, start, and actually using that simple discipline and tracking when we've raised something and had good dialogue around it. Are we making decisions of what to do about this shift in our thinking, and be held accountable to that? And then finally, profile and influence is not only internally on our team, but how do we take these learnings and use them with our investors, with our partners, with our customers? And we can measure those things. So this can be quite actionable. And you already have the kernel of this, because it's really the strategic artifacts that we get to use over and over and over again. So the thesis and insight is really our force map. And the value capture is the value capture layers. A formal positioning is what we're doing with the attributes and how we're positioning against the competition, and really using strategic inputs and strategic artifacts that we've talked about through the whole Beast Vision sprint, but using them as capturing the thinking and alignment at one point in time, and then bringing them up at the 4 C's learnings and formally adjusting them as you go through these learning loops. And that's really powerful, so that you can see the progression of thinking and also communicate it. But it's also powerful because it formalizes that we're not making a change unless we make it together and we actually adjust the artifact. And that really dials back the noise and brings intention and alignment to the team. And of course, your story arc is critical to all this. And when we make fundamental changes, it's important to go back to the story arc and change the story itself. If there's a fundamental change to the key inputs, we need to adjust the keynote and the story arc so that that's the story we're telling everyone. And if there's a new version, to release that to all our key stakeholders and explain why we made the changes. And these are very simple steps that actually make the organization agile and actually bring agility to the whole ecosystem that we operate in. So you got the pieces, your one-page model, how you do strategic positioning on your value capture layers and how you compare yourself to your competition. You can actually be paying attention to the digital landscape that you live in and looking for white space and bring what you're doing around marketing and communication into the learning loops. We've talked about the 3 horizon swim lanes. We know what the value capture layers look like and what success looks like in Horizon 3. Now on an activity stream basis, what are the big rocks in Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and where do we have gaps? What are we not working on that we're going to need to do to achieve the full value that we envision? Remember all the discussions around community and a central organization versus a distributed organization, and we can bring that into the learning loops. We didn't talk much about pricing strategy, but it's another area of formalization that can come into a clear artifact of where we are at different points in time and adjust it over time. We had lots of discussion about IP strategy, and if that's critical, that should come into the learning loops, and we should create formal artifacts so that people can see what we're learning and what we're changing. We talked about value mapping and comparables. That comes into what are we seeing in the capital markets, and we should be updating our learnings and be really clear around the value range and where we fit and what we need to do to constantly raise our value. And of course, our economic model, our financial model has to reflect all of these things. And these are artifacts that can be used in these regular learning loop sessions. And it's the job of the Office of H3 to do the formal changes and communicate that both internally and to our key stakeholders. Well, there you go. That's a whole bunch of things that you can do with a clear stream. And the point of the stream of activity of Office of H3 is to make sure that we're learning, and staying aligned, and that we're shedding noise while we execute so we can focus on our current priorities. And we're trying to balance that tension all the time. And it can't be left to chance. It's something you need to bake into the organization. And honestly, the best owner is the CEO or the core founding leadership team. That's it. Go forth, rise up, be a beast, stay true to your vision. Thank you. It was a genuine pleasure working with you this week, and I can't wait for your keynotes. Have an awesome day. And thanks again for doing the survey. Really appreciate the feedback. Thank you. Ciao.